Geoffrey Chaucer wrote this literary masterpiece in the late 1300s. We're talking around 1387 to 1400, and here's what makes it revolutionary. He wrote it in English, not Latin, not French, which were the prestigious literary languages of the time, but Middle English. The language ordinary people spoke. That might not sound like a big deal to us, but back then, it was huge. Chaucer was basically saying, English is good enough for serious literature. Now the structure is brilliant. Chaucer uses what we call a frame narrative. Picture this. It's springtime and a bunch of people, 29 pilgrims plus Chaucer himself, are gathered at the Tabard Inn in Southwark just outside London. They're all heading to Canterbury Cathedral to visit the shrine of St. Thomas Becket, who was murdered in the cathedral back in 1170. Pilgrimages were a big deal in medieval times, part religious devotion, part vacation, part social event. The innkeeper Harry Bailey comes up with this idea to pass the time on this journey. Why don't you all tell stories? Each of you will tell 2 stories on the way there and 2 on the way back. Whoever tells the best story, most entertaining and most morally instructive, wins a free dinner when we get back, paid for by everyone else. And they all agree. Now here's the thing, Chaucer never finished this massive project. He originally planned for 120 stories, 30 pilgrims times 4 stories each, but he only completed about 24 stories before he died. Even incomplete, though, it's a masterpiece. The general prologue is where we meet our pilgrims. This is where Chaucer introduces us to all these characters, and it's absolutely brilliant. The prologue starts with this gorgeous description of spring. You've probably heard it even if you haven't read Chaucer. When that April with his showers soot, when April with its sweet showers has pierced the drought of March, when flowers are blooming, when birds are singing all night because they're so happy, this is when people long to go on pilgrimages. It's this beautiful, hopeful opening that sets up expectations of renewal and spiritual journey. But then Chaucer introduces us to the actual pilgrims, and we quickly realize that not everyone is on this trip for purely spiritual reasons. Now, here's where Chaucer is genius. He presents himself as a character, a naive, friendly guy who's just reporting what he sees. He describes everyone in these vivid portraits, and he seems to be just innocently telling us about his fellow travelers. But we, as readers, can see through it. When he says something like, "The monk loves to hunt." And why shouldn't he? We recognize that, wait a minute, monks are supposed to be praying and studying, not chasing rabbits. This is called dramatic irony, and Chaucer uses it brilliantly throughout. The first person he describes is the knight, and this makes sense because the knight is the highest-ranking person socially. Chaucer presents him as this ideal figure. He's fought in 15 major battles, he's brave, he's honorable, he's modest. His clothes are still stained from his armor because he came straight from his latest campaign to go on this pilgrimage. He represents the chivalric ideal, the way knights were supposed to be. And you know what? Most scholars think Chaucer actually means it. The knight is genuinely admirable. He's going to tell the first story, which is appropriate given his status. Then comes the squire. His son, who's about 20 years old. Now the squire is also training to be a knight, but he's still in that romantic, youthful phase. He's got curly hair, he's fashionably dressed, he can sing and dance and write poetry. He's fighting in battles, sure, but really he's trying to impress his lady. He's like a knight in training with all the courtly love stuff going on. He's not bad, just young and still figuring things out. Then we get to the prioress, and this is where Chaucer's irony really kicks in. Her name is Madame Eglantine, and Chaucer describes her in incredible detail. She's got perfect table manners, she doesn't drop food, she wipes her lips so carefully that there's no grease in her cup. She speaks French, though in the English style, not the Parisian way. She's very concerned about being refined and elegant. Here's the thing, she's a nun. She's supposed to be focused on spiritual matters, on poverty, on serving God, but instead she's obsessed with courtly manners. She's tender-hearted, sure, she cries if she sees a dead mouse or a beaten dog, but she also feeds her little pet dogs roasted meat and milk, and she shouldn't even have pets. She wears fancy jewelry, including this brooch that says Ama Vincit Omnia, love conquers all. Now that could mean divine love, but it probably means romantic love. Chaucer's description is so gentle and affectionate that you almost miss the criticism. He's not being mean about it, he seems to find her charming, but he's definitely showing us that she's more interested in being an elegant lady than being a devoted nun. It's subtle satire. Then the monk. Oh boy, the monk. This guy is supposed to be living in poverty, chastity and obedience, studying and praying. Instead, he loves hunting. He's got fancy horses, greyhounds, expensive clothes with fur trim. His face is all red and shining like he's been well fed, which he has been. He's fat, he's happy, he's living the good life. And Chaucer in his naive narrator voice says, "You know, there are these old rules that say monks should stay in the monastery and study, but why shouldn't a vigorous man like this enjoy hunting?" And we're supposed to read that and think, aha, because he's a monk. The monk has completely abandoned his vows for worldly pleasure. Then there's Friar Hubert, and he might be even worse. Friars were supposed to be like the Franciscans. They took vows of poverty and went around helping the poor and sick. But this guy, he's figured out how to make money from his position. He hears confessions, but only if you pay him, and then he'll give you easy penance. He's seduced young women and then arranged their marriages. He knows all the taverns and innkeepers, but avoids lepers and beggars. You know, the people he's actually supposed to be helping. He's basically turned his religious vocation into a profitable scam, and Chaucer describes him as being really good at his job, which is getting money out of people. It's devastating satire. Then comes the merchant, who is interesting because he's very concerned with appearing successful. He's always talking about his profits, about protecting trade routes, about currency exchange. He's engaged in what was considered usury, lending money at interest, which was technically sinful. And here's a curious detail. Chaucer says he doesn't even know the guy's name. There's something impersonal and anonymous about him, which fits with the commercial world he represents. Now, here's a contrast. The clerk is an Oxford student, and he's so devoted to learning that he spends all his money on books instead of food. His horse is skinny, he's skinny, his clothes are threadbare. He'd rather have 20 books of Aristotle than fancy clothes or musical instruments. He speaks only when necessary, and when he does, it's with moral virtue. He loves to learn and he loves to teach. This is Chaucer showing us what a scholar should be, genuinely devoted to knowledge, unworldly, generous with what he knows. The clerk is poor by choice because he values education over everything else. He's admirable in the same way the knight is. Then the sergeant of law and the franklin come into the spotlight. The sergeant of law is this successful lawyer who knows every legal case since William the Conqueror. He's competent, he's respected, he gets royal appointments. But Chaucer slips in this observation. He seemed busier than he was. There's a hint that maybe he's putting on a show, that he's very concerned with his image. The franklin is a wealthy landowner who loves good food and wine. His table is always loaded with provisions. He's an Epicurean, he believes pleasure is the highest good. But he's not presented as evil or even bad. He's generous, he served in Parliament, he's respected. He just really, really loves his comfort. Then, there are 5 guildsmen, tradesmen from different crafts, traveling together in their guild uniforms with fancy silver-mounted knives. They're prosperous enough that their wives can be called Madame and attend important civic events. Chaucer treats them as a group because they represent this rising middle class, these urban craftsmen who are gaining economic and political power. Their social ambitions are very clear. They bring their own cook, Roger, who's excellent at his job. But and this is gross, he has this open, running ulcer on his shin. When you're eating food prepared by someone with a festering sore, that's not great. It's a realistic, disturbing detail that grounds the whole pilgrimage in bodily reality. Then the shipman, who is this tough sea captain from Dartmouth. He's deeply tanned, he's good at his job, he knows every harbour. But he also steals wine from the merchants he transports, and when he defeats enemies at sea, he makes them walk the plank. He's competent but completely amoral, practical and ruthless. The doctor of physic comes next, who is a doctor skilled in medicine and astrology. He can determine the favourable hours for treatment based on the planets. He knows the cause of every disease. But he loves gold, he profits from patients especially during plague outbreaks, and he rarely reads the Bible. There's this medieval suspicion of doctors who get rich from other people's suffering, and Chaucer taps into that. And then comes the wife of Bath, one of the most famous characters in all of literature, the wife of Bath. Her name is Alice, though we don't learn that until later. She's a cloth maker, she's somewhat deaf, she's got this gap-toothed smile that was considered sexy in medieval times. And here's the key thing, she's been married 5 times. 5 times. In an era when women were supposed to be quiet and submissive, she's loud, confident, experienced, and totally unapologetic about her sexuality. She's been on pilgrimages to Jerusalem, Rome, all over the place. She wears these elaborate headdresses that weigh 10 pounds, fancy scarlet stockings, soft new shoes. She knows about love's remedies, meaning she's experienced in romance and sex. She's bold, she's vital, she's one of the most memorable characters Chaucer creates, and she's going to have a lot to say when it's her turn to tell a tale. Then the parson. Here's where we get another genuinely good person. The parson is a poor country priest, but he's rich in holy thought and work. He actually practices what he preaches. He visits his parishioners on foot no matter the weather, he's patient with sinners. He doesn't abandon his rural parish for an easy job in London. He's learned, he's devoted, he's everything a priest should be. It's significant that Chaucer can show us this ideal clergy member, because it means his satire of the corrupt clergy isn't just cynical. He's not saying all religious people are bad, he's saying, look, here's what they should be like, and here's how most of them actually are. With the parson is his brother, the ploughman, who's this hard-working farmer. He loves God and his neighbor, he pays his tithes faithfully even though he's poor, and he helps other poor people for free. He'll thresh grain and dig ditches for Christ's sake. Together, these two brothers show that true Christian virtue exists, and it doesn't require wealth or status, just sincere faith and moral integrity. Then comes the miller. Now things get rougher. The miller is this huge, brawny guy with a red beard and this wart on his nose with red bristles sticking out of it. His mouth is like a furnace, he can tear doors off their hinges with his head, and he leads the pilgrimage playing bagpipes. He tells dirty jokes, he steals grain from customers by taking triple the actual toll, and there's this phrase about him having a thumb of gold, which was a proverbial saying about dishonest millers. He's crude, he's strong, he's physically excessive in every way, and he's going to tell a hilarious, dirty story right after the night's refined romance, completely disrupting the orderly plan. Then the masterful is a purchasing agent for a law school, and even though he's uneducated, he can outwit all the learned lawyers he works for. He's clever, he's good with money, and he manages to profit while keeping everyone satisfied. There's this interesting theme here about practical intelligence versus formal education. The reeve is an estate manager named Oswald who's thin, bad-tempered, and rides at the very back of the group. He manages his lord's estate so well that no auditor can find fault with his accounts, but everyone knows he's been enriching himself on the side. He's intimidating, he's competent, and he's corrupt. Oh, and here's an important detail. He used to be a carpenter. The summoner comes next. Okay, this guy is nasty. A summoner's job was to summon people to church court for moral offenses. And this one has a fire-red face covered in pimples and boils, scabby eyebrows, and a patchy beard. He eats garlic, onions, and leeks, and he drinks strong red wine. Children are afraid of him when they see him. He speaks a few Latin phrases when he's drunk. But here's what makes him truly terrible. He takes bribes. If you pay him, he'll let you keep sinning and ignore your excommunication. He has control over young people in his district and uses it corruptly, probably blackmailing them over sexual matters. He wears a garland like a crown and carries a big cake like a shield, mockingly imitating sacred imagery. His diseased face was seen as reflecting his spiritual corruption. He's one of the most repulsive characters Chaucer creates. And finally, traveling with the summoner, we have the pardoner. This guy has long, stringy yellow hair, no beard, bulging eyes, and a high voice. Chaucer hints that he might be a eunuch or effeminate. There's something sexually ambiguous about him, which medieval people associated with moral corruption. Here's his scam. He carries a bag full of pardons supposedly fresh from Rome, basically documents that forgive your sins if you pay money. And he's got fake relics. A pillowcase he claims is the Virgin Mary's veil, a piece of cloth supposedly from St. Peter's sale. He makes more money in one day selling this garbage than the honest parson makes in 2 months. But here's what's really interesting. Despite being a complete fraud, he can read biblical lessons beautifully and preach powerfully. He's going to openly confess his fraudulent methods in his prologue. He knows he's a hypocrite and he doesn't care. He's one of the most psychologically complex villains in literature. And then there's Chaucer himself as a character. He presents himself as friendly, naive, eager to please, just reporting what he sees. This is crucial to understanding the work. Chaucer the poet is using Chaucer the pilgrim as a mask. The naive pilgrim seems to accept everyone at face value, but we readers can see through the hypocrisy. It's brilliant technique.